In this video, I'm going to explain why Verstappen is the most pampered world champion in F1 history, and that despite him being a fast driver, he is not nearly as good as the media and many of his fans make him out to be. This is because his recent teammates have not been good enough benchmarks for him to be propelled in the all-time greats list of F1 drivers, and when he has had competent teammates, he hasn't looked anything special. The recent teammates that were not good enough benchmarks that I'm referring to are Gasly, Albon and Perez. Gasly is a top midfield driver at best. He only had 2 years of F1 experience prior to his Red Bull move, and the Red Bull is notoriously a difficult car to adapt to because it favors an oversteer setup. The same thing can be echoed for Albon too. In my opinion, he is a top midfield driver at best. He had only raced 12 races in F1 at Toro Rosso before he was shoehorned straight into the Red Bull seat. And as mentioned before, the Red Bull's oversteery design philosophy made it difficult for him to adapt, which he has also stated himself in a recent podcast. As for Checo, despite him having vast amounts of experience, he too is a top midfield driver at best. He isn't great in qualifying, and his driving style heavily favors an understeer setup, which contrasts with the Red Bull's characteristics. This is also why Checo does particularly well at the start of the season when the car isn't as oversteery, but once the design philosophy scope moves away from him, he heavily struggles. But to briefly summarize what I've just said, all of Verstappen's recent teammates are not world beaters and are basically midfield drivers who struggle to handle the car, so I do not think that Verstappen should get praise for beating them in the way in which he does by the media. However, when Verstappen has had competent teammates through the likes of Sainz and Ricciardo, his supposed domination has been a very different story. For the 2015 season, where Verstappen and Sainz were teammates at Toro Rosso, out of the 19 rounds completed, Sainz beat Verstappen 10-9 in the qualifying head-to-head, and out of the 10 races that they both finished, the race head-to-head was 5 apiece. It is also important to add that Sainz had 7 DNFs that season, while Verstappen had 4. Now moving on to when Verstappen and Ricciardo were teammates from 2016 to 2018, Ricciardo comprehensively beat the Dutchman. Ricciardo outscored Verstappen every single season and accumulated a total of 457 points to Verstappen's 377 points. Ricciardo also had a pole position to Verstappen's 0. Ricciardo had 18 podiums to Verstappen's 11. They both had 3 race wins, and this is with Ricciardo also having way more DNFs. So to briefly summarize the situations when Verstappen has had competent teammates alongside him, he's looked bang average. Now moving on to his championship-winning years, even these times are flattering to him. In 2021, it's self-explanatory as to what is going to be mentioned here, as he should not have won that year's championship. And putting Abu Dhabi aside, how on earth the FIA gave points for that farcical show at Belgium, how he didn't receive a penalty for Brazil which would have put him behind Bottas, and how he wasn't disqualified from the race in Saudi, is beyond me. And it just shows that the 2021 championship was corrupted to end Hamilton's dominance. And funnily enough, to all the Verstappen fans who tried to make out like the Red Bull was the inferior car that year, even Adrian Newey came out and said after Abu Dhabi that the Red Bull was the faster car over the course of the year.
Adrian, obviously you and your team also have such a big part in this because you maximize these new regulations on the rear end there aerodynamically. Is that right?
Well, it's difficult to know exactly. I mean, we all voted for the regulation changes. Did it suit us more than Mercedes? It seemed so certainly earlier in the year. Obviously, the last few races they've come back very strong. But I think on balance, we've probably had the quicker car.
So Verstappen essentially failed to win the 2021 championship on merit, despite having the faster car against a 38-year-old man. And as for 2022 and 2023, those years are completely void in my opinion, as he had no competition whatsoever. The same way in which Verstappen fans try and discredit Hamilton's 2019 and 2020 championships for having no competition is the same way that I'm going to discredit Verstappen's 2022 and 2023 championships, and I won't follow this stupid agenda about how it was Verstappen and not the Red Bull that dominated, as Checo still managed to comfortably claim P2 in the standings after being arguably the worst driver on the grid that year. And even Verstappen's mentality is overrated. The guy literally came out and said that he'll retire if he ever had to experience the pressure of what 2021 put him under, and he's also mentioned how he'd leave F1 if they became uncompetitive, which I find hilarious, as Verstappen fans try to claim that the false rumors of Hamilton wanting to leave an uncompetitive Mercedes to join Red Bull was a sign of his mental weakness. So to encapsulate what has been said in this video, my point is that despite Verstappen obviously being a talented driver, he is vastly overrated, and his name should be nowhere near the GOAT debate as of now. Until he beats a competent teammate in a championship battle, or until he isn't gifted a championship by the FIA in such a scenario, I will not view him in the same regards as I do with Hamilton or Senna. Whether he knows it or not, he is just being propped up by the FIA in their agenda-fueled mission as a means of erasing the previous dominance of Sir Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes.